Hi, this is Dave Kale, and welcome to this Christian Business Insights podcast. I've been a Christian since I was 24 years old, and I've been in business that whole time as a professional speaker, author, and consultant. I've authored 13 books presented in 47 states and 11 countries, and have personally and contractually worked with over 500 different organizations. It's a lot of business involvement. And over that time, I've picked up some knowledge and some wisdom that the Lord has given to me, and now I'm sharing it with you. So you're going to hear some really practical things as well as some unconventional perspectives. Much of what you'll hear in this podcast, you will never hear repeated from the pulpit. So if you got an open mind and you want to build your business, this is the place. Everything I'm doing is designed to help you build businesses that excel in the field and impact the world for the kingdom. I hope you're educated, inspired, and motivated. Here we go. Hi, this is Dave, and today I'm going to be treating part 2 of a two-part series responding to a question that I received. Here's the question. Dave, I'm a salesperson. I feel really conflicted between the culture of the job and my commitment to Christ. Do you have any suggestions as to how I reflect my Christianity on the job? And in the last podcast, I gave the first part of my answer, and here's the second. So, do I have any suggestions for how I reflect my Christianity on the job? My answer is yes, I do. And as you may or may not know, I have been a salesperson and a sales trainer and a sales consultant and professional speaker and author for almost all my adult life. And for most of that time, I've been a born-again Christian. So I have had ample opportunities to consider, the question that you're asking, because I've asked it myself many times. In the first part of my response to this question, the last podcast, I examined the beliefs and attitudes that you ought to nurture in order to fully realize your potential as a Christian salesperson. So in the first one, it was the beliefs and attitudes. Your job gives you a special high-impact ministry, and you ought to develop the Christian virtues to gain more influence over those around you. And I also recommend that you have a free download called the Christian Salesperson's Manifesto. I'll put that in the show notes, the link to that, and you can just go get it. It's free. Now, in this podcast, I'm going to consider the principles and practices that you should build into your routine. So there's several things that are ways to respond to this issue of being a Christian salesperson. The first is the beliefs and attitudes that you intentionally and willfully create in yourself. And the second is the principles and practices. So these are all separate little pieces. I'm often asked if the Bible has anything to say about sales. And while there are some passages that provide some direction, like do unto others as you would have them do unto you, there are some. But for the most part, I believe the Bible is silent on the strategies and tactics that a professional salesperson can employ to do well at his or her job. There are some passages that you can apply, but they're a bit of a stretch to do so. Now, this does not mean, however, that God has left us totally on our own. Like many other things, He put certain principles and processes in place in creation, in the natural world. So when God told Adam to care for and work the garden, He was creating the pattern for the work that He assigned to mankind. Care for His creation and continually uncover and co-create with Him succeeding levels of organization and sophistication. Uncover the natural resources and the principles and processes He built into creation. And when we discover them and implement them, we dramatically improve our results because we are in sync with God's plan. So creation is the raw material, and God wants to work with us to continually develop it into greater levels of sophistication and organization. Now, here's an example of exactly what I'm talking about. Let's say growing corn. Okay. Now, I don't think there's anything said about the process of growing corn in the Bible. So maybe there is, and I just never caught it, but I don't believe there is. But there is a process in the natural world, in creation. And once we uncover that process and implement it, it allows us to dramatically increase our results. At one time, for example, corn was found and gathered by the people. And I suppose, that some people were better at spotting and gathering corn than others. And I suppose the best corn gatherer could spot a healthy ear of corn from a distance. So there were some people who were much better at it than others. But then, at some point, someone had the idea to actually cultivate, not gather. And so that person changed our mindset, and we gradually learned certain things that were already present in the natural world. We learned to identify the best soil for corn. See, nobody created that. I mean, God created that. It was there. We just had to discover it. We'd had to discover how deep to plant the kernels. We had to discover how much space to allow between the stalks and how much to water and fertilize and so on. Now, these aspects and these truths were always there in creation. But it took someone with a different way of thinking to discover the principles and practices that God built into the natural world and then to use them to multiply the results. And as a result of our continuing study of what's in the natural world, we can feed the world with our corn. Now, the same thing is true about sales. I don't know that there's a lot said in the Bible about sales, but there are principles and practices built into creation and the way human beings work that when we uncover and implement them, we can dramatically improve our results. Now, it is true that one doesn't have to be a Christian to understand and implement God's principles and practices for growing corn. You don't have to be a Christian to understand that. It's built into the natural world. Or to selling effectively. So you don't have to be a Christian to sell effectively. But at the same time, because these principles were created by God and built into creation, it's also true that salespeople ought to be master salespeople because they stick closely to those God-given principles and practices. At the tactical level, the principles and practices employed by Christian salespeople ought to be the same as though those employed by the best salespeople, Christian or not. And that's because those principles were created by God and embedded in His creation. And He wants His people to use them. In my book, How to Sell Anything to Anyone, Anytime, I articulate a core set of God-given principles and practices that anyone, especially Christian business people, can embed into their routines. Now, there's a major illustration. Unfortunately, I can't show you the illustration in the podcast, but there's a major illustration, and if you want to go buy the book, How to Sell Anything to Anyone, Anytime, you'll see it. Let me just describe it to you because the rest of the podcast is going to make reference to it. So if you imagine a circle, and the circle has an outer ring of sequential steps going around and an inner circle. So here's the steps on the outer ring, and this is what I call the KOA sales process. I didn't create it; I discovered it. It was already there. So step one at the very top of the circle on the outer ring is engage with the right people. Step two, moving down and around clockwise, find out what they want. Step three, show them how what you have gives them what they want. Next step, gain agreement on the next step. Follow up and leverage satisfaction, and then you're back to where you started from. And in the center, there's an oval in the center, and that says make them comfortable with you. Okay, got it? Now, let's look at each piece and kind of drill just a little bit. And by the way, each one of these little pieces that I'm going to take a moment or two to talk about, honestly, they're at least an 8 to 16 hour training session if you really dig deeply into it. So there's a whole lot more depth and detail than what I'm going to talk about right now. But the first step is to engage with the right people. And engage means that you interact in some kind of communication. It can be face-to-face, it can be over the phone, it can be via email or via website, but you engage back and forth communication with the right people. Right people means those people who have a need or an interest in your product and for whom the timing is right. It's a good time for them. Now, if you do not engage with the right people, you spend all your time in the wrong place. Sort of like trying to plant your corn on a cement sidewalk. You can do everything else right, but it won't matter. Notice each step within the framework of each step that follows occurs within the framework of the right people. In other words, if you do all the right things and you do them with the wrong people, it's all an incredible waste of time. So in one sense, engaging with the right people is a fundamental, a keystone concept. All right. Step 2 is make them comfortable with you. Now that's the center. And the reason it's the center is because it touches everything. Now if they're going to believe what you say, you must be somewhat credible, and they must feel at least a little bit comfortable with you. If they are not comfortable with you, they won't spend much time with you, and the time that they do spend will be guarded and tentative. It doesn't matter if it's on a website or a face-to-face encounter or anything in between. They may be convinced to do business with you because of the fundamental attractiveness of your offer, but if they're not comfortable with you, it will be an action taken against the current. They will be forever uncomfortable and eager to find a replacement. On the other hand, if they are comfortable with you, they won't mind spending time with you. They'll be much more open to sharing the information that's necessary for you to do a good job of crafting a solution. They'll believe what you have to say. You'll get the benefit of the doubt, and they'll be eager to share future opportunities with you. The next step, notice that step 2, making them comfortable with you, is the center because it touches everything. See, this thing about making them comfortable with you is every interaction that you have and every step of the process, it informs and lubricates and make it easy to do those things. When you can make it happen early in the sales process, it still has to be continually nurtured throughout the process. At any point in the sales process, your customer can grow leery and irritated with you, and that disrupts everything. So that's step 2. Step 3, find out what they want. Find out what they want. Selling is not manipulating people so that they take something they don't want. It is instead finding out what they already want and appealing to that interest. The best salespeople excel at this step in the process. I believe this step, finding out what they want, is the heart of selling. It's the essence of what sales is all about. I know that flies in the face of the routine practices of multitudes of salespeople who believe that the end, all their focus is to push their product. Now, you can proclaim the merits of your product to willing and unwilling listeners and web page visitors far and wide. You can attempt to sway them with the powerful features and advantages that your product has over the competition, or you can focus on the customer. You can find out what motivates him or her, what issues are important, what problems he or she has, what objectives they're trying to solve, what it looks for in a vendor, etc. That's a better way. Focus on the customer, not your product. Everything that comes before this moment is designed to get to this moment, understanding what the customer wants. And everything you do after is based on this step. You see, finding out what the customer wants is the fulcrum upon which the entire sales process pivots. Okay, now that you found out what they want, you move on to the next step, which is show them how what you have gives them what they want. Proclaiming your product's features is, the preferred routine of the mediocre salesperson. Personally and individually, crafting your presentation to show the customer how what you have gives him or her what he wants is the mindset that, in part, defines the master salespeople. If what you have doesn't get them what they want, you either have the wrong thing or you're talking to the wrong person. Okay? Step 5 is to gain agreement on the next step. Now, closing the sale is by far the most overhyped phase of selling. If you have the right person and you've uncovered something they want and you've shown them how what you have gives them what they want, why wouldn't they buy it? Why wouldn't they take the next positive step? It's just natural. You just need to help them define what it is and commit to it. So in a simple direct to the consumer sale, the next step is typically to buy the product. However, there's a whole lot more complex sales, B2B sales, that there can be a series of appropriate next steps. They may need to test it, they may need to evaluate it, they may need to submit it to a committee, and so on. So in a complex B2B sale, it's not you don't ask for the order, you ask for the next step. The next step. And every sales interaction has an assumed next step. If you call someone for an appointment, the next step is the appointment. If you present your solution to a decision maker, the next step may be the order. In between, there's thousands of potentially different sales calls and thousands of potential action steps that follow the sales call. The agreement is the ultimate rationale for the sales call and the aspect that makes it a sales call. The sales call is set apart from the rest of the interactions of the world by the fact that it anticipates an agreement. Without an agreement, the process has been a waste of time. It's the ultimate goal of every salesperson, every sales process, and every sales call. Gain an agreement on the next step. Then, at this point, we're going to assume that they buy. They buy. And the next thing is for them to buy. And your job now is to follow up and leverage the transaction and see if you can't uncover other opportunities. So after they buy, you then make sure that they were satisfied, and you assume that because they're satisfied, they will want to do other business with you and will want to let their friends know about you as well. I know it sounds simple, and it is. This is the step of the sales process that is most commonly neglected. Most salespeople are so focused on making the sale that they neglect to consider that the real purpose is to satisfy the customer, and that extends beyond the sale itself. The sales call on the customer made after the sale is complete, delivered, and implemented by the customer is one of the most powerful sales calls available. In it, the salesperson seeks assurance that the customer is satisfied, and then he or she leverages that affirmation to uncover additional opportunities within the customer and or referrals to people in other organizations. Now, that's the process that is built into human nature and built into creation, and we have uncovered that just the way we've uncovered how to grow corn. We've uncovered the natural, what the Lord put into the natural world, and we can do each step better. It's one thing to be able to do each step, and it's another to be able to do each step better. Just like every other field of human endeavor, there are average performers and there are those who do it better. Now, here's an example. I like to golf, but I am at best an average golfer. I'm not nearly as good as many of the golfers that I golf with, and I know I can golf better. After all, many of them are better, and I'm sort of a kind of athletic guy. I have been, so I suspect I probably could golf better. And every year, I expect that I will golf a bit better, but I just don't have the time and energy to put into becoming better. And so while I'm an average golfer, I could, if I choose, become better. I realize it would mean a whole lot more practice and maybe get a coach and better equipment, so I could get better if I chose to, and I just don't choose to. So that's true with every one of the steps in the process. There is an adequate performance, and then there is a better performance. But it's not an either-or kind of situation. There are degrees of better. There's lots of room between me and, Tiger Woods. Think of your performance on each step. Each of the steps I just talked about, like a dart target. You know what I'm thinking about? It's a round dart target split into 6 or 8 pie-shaped slices, has a number of rings, and each one's smaller than the one immediately to the outside of it. The bullseye in the middle has the smallest ring and therefore the greatest scoring potential. Now, when you're playing darts, you know you throw your darts at the target, and the closer your dart strikes to the bullseye, the more points you score. If your dart strikes at the outermost ring, you score just a few points. But you do many times better if you hit the bullseye. Now, every time you engage in one of the process steps I just talked about, it's like throwing a dart at the target. You can hit the outer ring, score a few points, or you can hit closer to the bullseye and score more. You can do each step of the process, and you can do each step better. And like the ever smaller rings of the target, there are degrees of better. The bullseye is always the vision of perfection. Christian salespeople should be committed to improving forever in each of the core competencies represented on that illustration I described. So how can you eliminate the conflict between the culture of the job and your commitment to Christ as a salesperson? Build in the beliefs and the attitudes that are necessary, and then build in the practices and processes and tactics that you forever improve so that you will become excellent, gain influence, gain impact, and be excellent at the ministry of sales. Okay? Now, before I go, I want to ask you a favor. Ask a favor of you, and that's this. You know, we don't sell ads or do anything, ask for donations, do anything like that on this podcast. I just do it free. But I would like you to help me, and the way I'd like you to help me is to write a review, positive review, on whatever channel you're listening, whether it's Apple or Google or any of the others. Just write a positive review. That would be great. The other thing I'd like you to do is forward this to some of your colleagues and friends and urge them to subscribe. And let's expand our listeners. That's the idea. Will you help me do that? I would appreciate it. Okay? That's it. We're done. Bye-bye.